En la campaña política Tu voto vale, tu voto decide, realizada por las organizaciones el Consejo de Desarrollo Hispano, el Consejo de Herencia Hispano Canadiense, Planeamiento Social de Toronto, Latinx y El Centro para Gente de Habla Hispana, invitaron a la comunidad hispanoparlante a un desayuno-conferencia, en donde se expuso las agendas de los principales partidos políticos para decidir en las elecciones federales el día lunes, octubre 19, y en donde se espera que toda la comunidad hispana participe dando su voto al partido de su preferencia. En esta ocasión también la miembro del Parlamento representando al Partido Conservador no hizo acto de presencia en esta importante conferencia.
Good morning, buenos días todo el mundo. Realmente esto es una etapa muy significativa en el proceso de nuestra comunidad, pues es primera vez que realmente estamos llevando a cabo una actividad como esta en conocer más acerca de las plataformas de los partidos políticos en relación a las elecciones federales que ya vienen del 19 de octubre y obviamente está señalando el nuevo interés de nuestra comunidad en una actividad como esta. This is a great pleasure for us to be able to host this morning session, contrary to popular belief, because I already got the complaints about the morning, or not complaints, but it's a little bit of a challenge. But nevertheless, something else I would like to remark for starting. First of all, I would like to thank the colleagues of our press. This is the first time that we have local press and international press, and quickly I would like to mention my thanks to Hispanic Roots, Notimex, which have done an amazing job in publishing information not only in Canada but in the Spanish-speaking world, La Portada, El Centro News, Nova TV, El Correo Canadiense y Somos Toronto. Let me thank all of them because of their work. So, without much to do, I would like to mention that this initiative is a new endeavor in our community, in that we have found tremendous interest, contrary to what we usually thought, in terms of learning about what the political parties are doing. People in our community is starting to identify big issues that have to do with our presence in Canada, and big issues for today, but also for the future. We know that there is a lot of concerns about immigration, economics, senior citizens, and young people, women, and issues of particularly poverty and development. Anyway, so without saying anything else, I would like to welcome our moderator for today, which is our colleague Juan Carranza, and he will take over this conversation. Thank you very much.
Bueno, buenos días a todos. Un placer tenernos acá. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here. We're going to get started without delay. I have to my left, I have Michael Levitt. And he is a Liberal candidate in one of the federal ridings that has one of the highest concentrations of Latin Americans in Toronto. Okay, that's your center.
That's correct.
And to his left, we have Tania de Melo, who is also a candidate this time for the New Democratic Party, the NDP, in the riding of the Politico Center, which also has somewhat of a Latin American population as well, not as large as the one in Michael's riding, but they are both familiar with the issues that are affecting our community, so I think it's going to be an interesting debate. Perhaps I just want to turn it over to Mike first, and then to Tania, just to tell us a little bit about themselves, who they are, what they've done in their private lives, and why it is.
We're using this one? Okay.
Sure.
Good morning, everyone, and first of all, thank you very much to the organizers for putting on this event. I think that it's really important. We've got 10, 11 days left in what's been a very lengthy campaign For me, it's actually been just over 2 years. I started running my nomination campaign back in August of 2013. So when people say to me, wow, there's 10 days to go, it's such a long time, it's like, no, that's nothing. Like this is the end of a real 2-year adventure, and one that I'm very confident will continue after October 19th. It's great to be here this morning because, as mentioned, York Centre has such a large and vibrant Hispanic and Latino community, and one which I am lucky enough to have been engaged with over the course of the last number of months, not just during the actual official campaign, but in advance of that as well. In terms of who I am, so a couple of things. I'm a local entrepreneur and businessman in York Centre. I'm a community activist. Tanya and I were having a discussion about this before. I've been involved significantly in the area of advocacy, and have been involved within my own community. Actually, in my own community, starting up this sort of a process. I'm one of the founding members of the Canadian Jewish Political Affairs Committee, and the CJPAC, as it's known, actually is about engagement and making sure that our community has a voice in the political system. And that's the same work that I see happening here this morning, making sure that the Hispanic and Latino community is engaging, learning, and making sure their voices are heard in the political process. It's certainly something I've noticed from the community over the last number of months in York Centre. They really do have a voice, and it's a strong voice, and I've always been happy to engage, and I can see obviously the NDP are here and engaging. It's a shame that there was nobody available from the Conservatives this morning, but for whatever reason they chose not to engage. The riding of York Centre, let me just tell you a little bit about geographically where it falls. We've got Steeles Avenue to the north, the 401 to the south, Bathurst Street to the east, and then Jane, and it dips around kind of to Keele. So it's Jane, and then it curves up to Keele. And it's actually the western portion of the riding that has the largest Hispanic and Latino community. You may be familiar with the Center for Spanish-Speaking Peoples. That's right on the southwestern, it's literally on the southwestern border of my riding. And I've spent some time there meeting both the families and the community that use it, as well as some of the leadership. And they've also, I'll maybe speak about it a little later, they've got a very wonderful legal clinic in there that's doing some great work for community members who really need the help and are struggling, particularly in the area of immigration, which I'm quite sure will come up. So that's a little bit about who I am. I ran my involvement over the last decade, again, within the Liberal Party, had been on a number of fronts, but I think there's a time at which you look at things and you look at the direction of the country, and two things motivated my getting out of kind of the grassroots and onto the front lines, as I say. The first was a very strong belief in my leader and the leader of the Liberal Party, Justin Trudeau. I believe in his vision for Canada. I believe in what he's putting forth in terms of bringing communities together, bringing Canadians together, having an end to this process that we've seen from the Conservatives, where they're seeking to divide on every issue. So that was number one. Number two was a real concern about the future of this country under another Harper mandate. We've had enough. Canada has had enough. And I just felt that I could no longer. I've got 2 teenage children. They're going to be heading off, one of them to university soon. I could no longer stand by while this country went in a direction that I see it going under the Harper Conservative government. It was enough, and I think you reach a point as an individual. Certainly, I'd been engaged in the process, and you just decide that you need to do something. So for me, it was about bringing my community skills and experience in multiple areas. I'm very involved in the philanthropic world. I'm very involved in the advocacy world. I'm also a businessman. And beyond any of the concerns I've got with Harper's direction of the country, I also have a concern that there's a lack of people with business experience coming in from outside, making a bit of a sacrifice in terms of leaving their businesses behind and bringing those skills into the political process. So that's a little bit about me and why I'm here joining you wonderful people this morning. Thank you.
Oops. Thanks. You're good. Hola, buenos días. Me llamo Tania. Voy a comenzar en español y después voy a hablar en inglés. Es un placer estar aquí. Yo trabajé en México para Deloitte Consulting al principio y después de eso trabajé con las Naciones Unidas en Colombia. Entonces tenemos latinos en mi zona, pero para mí estoy aquí porque me siento muy unida a la cultura y he trabajado mucho con los latinos. Entonces, gracias por haber invitado a mí. Voy a comenzar a hablar un poco de la plataforma del NPD, pero en inglés. So I'll speak in English now. Si jamás tienen una pregunta en español, a mí me encanta hablar español. La gente pregunta siempre de dónde soy. Mi mamá es de la India y mi papá de Tanzania, pero yo tenía un novio mexicano, así que aprendí enseguida. But I will speak in English as well. I want to start by saying my connection to Latin America started when I worked in a business context for Deloitte Consulting in Mexico. And later I worked for the United Nations with the displaced population in Colombia. I spent quite a bit of time in Latin America and have a very strong connection to the region, particularly around humanitarian assistance, but also trade. So hopefully we'll talk about both of those things today. I want to start by talking a little bit about my history and how I got involved in politics to begin with. So I started as an economist in big business, and after that I was awarded a Fulbright scholarship, and I went to Princeton University. And from there I ended up working for the United Nations with refugees in Africa, in South America, and then at the head office in Geneva as well. So I have a strong balance, I think, in terms of my ability to balance economic as well as social priorities. So then the question becomes, why the NDP? For me, it was a very, very clear choice. I feel like the best way to describe it is, it's a little bit of a takeoff of a statement we have in Mexico, donde come uno, comen dos. Y la frase que yo utilizo en inglés es, lo que quiero para mí, quiero para mi vecino. What I want for myself, I want for my neighbor. So today I'm a human rights lawyer in Toronto that's Princeton educated and worked as an economist. But I didn't get here by myself. I came here as an immigrant, and I had access to a government that had social services that could help people who were working hard to get by. So many people don't know I grew up in public housing before I moved to my riding. I had access to excellent public education. I had a bus that took me to French immersion every day, so I speak French as well as Spanish and English. I had amazing healthcare, which is in peril in our country. And I say the healthcare I had is the reason my parents are alive and doing well today. They're seniors that are actively engaged in our community. And I went to University of Waterloo for my undergrad, and then later to McGill Law on full scholarship, where I was able to meet people from all over the world and from all walks of life, which is something I think you have when you have great education in the university context. So when I say what I want for myself, I want for my neighbor, what I mean is I am now fighting with the NDP to preserve these programs that helped people like myself and my family to get by. What we have today is a situation of massive unemployment. We have 1.3 million people unemployed right now in Canada, 300,000 more than when Harper began. For Latino populations, what I've seen is a struggle that we're seeing across Canada of insecure work, part-time work, no benefits, no pensions, minimum wages where even if you work 2 part-time jobs, you can't feed your family or pay your rent. This is something that's deeply disturbing for our party. The second thing that we're fighting for is daycare. So one thing I can tell you is my mother always says, have some children so that you can fight for daycare harder. But les puedo decir que la gente ya está sufriendo. Tiene niños y la familia es súper importante para nosotros. Pero el gasto que estamos pagando para guardar a los niños para que podamos trabajar es increíble. We're talking about families paying $1,000 a month or more for daycare. Over the year, that's the price of your mortgage. And what we're saying is what we want is an affordable daycare across Canada for people so that they have subsidized daycare and they can decide when they want to enter the workforce, as well as how they want to take care of their children from the savings that they have from those decisions. So it's about letting families make choices about daycare. And a third platform that we're very, very strongly fighting for is healthcare. Healthcare is an incredibly important platform, and there have been cuts by both the Liberal and Conservative government that are atrocious around our healthcare system that it's in peril right now. So those are three of the main things, and I'll talk about many others. In terms of the Latin American community, I wanted to talk about two aspects. The international relationships that Canada has with Latin America. One of the things the NDP is fighting for is a deepening, but also a diversification of our trade relationships. Instead of having bilateral relationships, Canada and Mexico, punto. Canada, Colombia, punto. Thinking of ways we can strengthen things like the Pacific Alliance. And hay alianzas en Latinoamérica que necesitan ayuda, apoyo, supervisión, consejos. And Canada can play a role in that kind of strengthening. Also looking at ways that we can look at our role in democratic governance in Latin America in terms of trade. And ways we can work with the Inter-American Development Bank. Ways we can work with the World Bank, the IMF, the OAS, to strengthen that role and improve democratic governance. And the last thing that our party is doing, and I will speak to this more later, is looking at what Latin Americans need in Canada. So looking at what we need in terms of temporary foreign workers permits, visas, and jobs. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's what I wanted to open with. Thank you.
Thank you to both candidates. Got my own microphone now.
Oh, good.
Oh, okay, good.
We're doing great. Thank you very much. I think you've hit on some of the important points that the community as a whole is looking at. I mean, the Vital Signs report was released this week, and in it there is a disturbing pattern that is once again highlighted in this report, and that is one of growing inequality. With over 900,000 visits to the food banks in a one-year span, and 16% of children in the city of Toronto going hungry at least once a week. 16%, in one of the wealthiest countries in the world with all kinds of resources. And some of the comments that you were making, they definitely resonate with us, with the community. Many of us had the opportunity to study because once upon a time there was a strong, student financial support program. Once upon a time, and tuition was much lower, and we have seen tuition skyrocket, and this represents a huge obstacle for our community that is already affected by a high school dropout rate. So anyways, it seems like we're being sandwiched from the bottom, from the top, and we wonder what each of your parties has to offer for this particular community, for the Latin American Hispanic community. I wonder if we could start with Tanya this time, and then we'll give you 5 minutes to respond to that comment, and then we'll pass it along to Mike.
Oh, speaking of Mike.
So there's so many things involved in what you just talked about. I was at the Toronto Vital Signs release this week, and the stark reality is that we have a growing inequality in this country, where we have a small percentage of people doing extremely well. We have a shrinking middle class that's going to nowhere, and many, many people that can't get by. And the groups that are most affected with by this reality are new immigrants, or people that have come to this country from another place. and it is acutely felt by Latin Americans and Hispanohablantes in Canada. One of the papers I wrote several years ago when I was at Princeton was called "Need a Doctor? Call a Taxi." And it was about the underutilization of immigrants in this country. And one of the things we're seeing by both the Conservative and Liberal government is a creation of a dual class of citizenship that I think is part of the danger. So this notion that if you're Canadian and you're considered Canadian and a Canadian citizen, you have certain rights. And if you've come from another country and maybe Canadian, or you come from another country and you're not a citizen, then different rights apply. And the danger in that is what you create is this is Canada, and that's what this means, and this is other. And we're seeing that in the workforce, right? So we're seeing immigrant communities and many Latin American communities suffering from jobs that don't have security. Part-time work, no benefits, difficulties around pensions. A huge issue that the NDP is looking into is the foreign credential recognition, and putting back $30 million that has been cut by both governments into recognizing the fact that people are coming with skills and abilities and that they can't get jobs. My Latin American friends come and tell me, la gente aquí es amiga, pero son amable, pero no amigos, right? That idea that we will help you, we'll be nice to you, but we don't see you as a part of this country. And what I'm hearing more and more is Latin Americans that are saying, we're even born here, and we're struggling to feel that we're fully integrated into the society. So in terms of how you deal with that, I think the first tack that we have to look at is this creation of dual citizenship. So looking at things like BLC 51 and what it means and which populations a bill like that targets. One of the things that's been very frustrating has been the Conservative push to other people through bills like this, but the Liberal support of a bill. So, making promises to support and promote immigration, but then voting, for bills that, are, in my mind, are destructive and abusive to people's rights and liberties, and target immigrants and disrespect their civil liberties. Beyond the citizenship and immigration debate and talking about sort of recognizing foreign credentials, when we look at what's happening with jobs and job security today, the biggest issue is around finding quality work, right? So we have a minimum wage in Ontario, for example, of $11, but it costs $3 to take transport one way. So people are having to work for 40 minutes just to afford to go to work and come home. So these are the kinds of things we need to think about. We need to think about this credential crisis because we want people working in fields where they're qualified and can move up, rather than starting in jobs where they don't have a chance to move up and they're constantly working and working without a reward. And a final thing that was just brought up that I wanna talk about is youth unemployment. This is a major crisis in Canada right now. We have 60,000 jobs that have been lost from the Harper government for youth. And the NDP is committed to two things. The first is investing $40 million in youth job opportunities. And the second is trying to create youth opportunities where youth aren't working for free. So we have a huge problem where I work at the University of Toronto right now, and our youth are expected to do internships for free in order to get a job. The NDP finds that exploitative and unfair and wants to respond by saying, what we will have is youth internship within the government, at the city level, at the provincial level, and at the national level, so that we can employ 40,000 youth, and that's the way we're going to tackle it. And I will close by just saying, in terms of this inequality, I think the root is to recognize that the inequality comes from seeing people as different, and some people deserving and some people less deserving, and that's where it begins, right? I've earned my money, you take care of yourself. We've lost that sense of what it is to see people as one Canadian, one community. And the second is this idea that we no longer are looking at our community as a neighborhood, that we are neighbors even if we don't live directly beside each other, and that needs to change.
Where to begin? So, I'm an immigrant as well. I moved here from the United Kingdom, from Scotland, with my mum when I was 13 years old. And I have to tell you that over the last number of months, I've banged on over 25,000 doors in York Centre. And you really come to understand the struggle that people are facing when you knock on their door, as I'm sure Tanya can attest, and you speak to them and you look them in the eye, and they share it with you, they do. And when I'm walking around York Centre, and particularly, as I mentioned, when I'm on the west side of the riding, where there are so many new immigrants, Hispanic and Latino for sure, but many others, Turkish, Filipino, and on and on and on. The same things come up, and those are issues around seniors concerned about being able to afford to stay in their homes, middle-class families that are struggling to put food on the table because, as mentioned, our middle class is just vanishing under this Harper government, young people, and you know, that's a huge one. We've got a youth employment crisis. And one of the things that I hear most commonly is that we've got students that are either going into debt to put themselves through university or college or training programs, or their parents are taking a second job to be able to afford to send them to school. And they come out of these programs, many of them with very, very wonderful degrees, and they can't find work. And that's not good enough. We need to be creating jobs that are well-paying and that have a career path. And that's something that we've pledged. We've pledged to create 40,000 good youth jobs, including 5,000 youth green jobs each year for the next 3 years by investing $300 million more in the youth employment strategy. So this is something we're dealing with heads on. The economy, I mean, listen, we are the one party, the Liberal Party is the party that is saying that now is the time for leadership because the conditions are right for the government to show leadership by investing in the economy, investing in Canadians, investing in jobs. So we're going to invest an additional $60 billion into the economy on infrastructure. Infrastructure in 3 areas. Transit and transportation, because any of us driving down here today or taking the subway or sitting in gridlock, we know the economic cost. We're going to work with municipalities, provinces. We're going to create solutions with them to help get this city and all the other cities moving again. We're going to invest in social infrastructure, another $20 billion. What is social infrastructure? It's things like affordable housing. I've spent time in numerous TCHC and other affordable housing across the city. I have to tell you something. We've got a building at Jane and Wilson that has to be seen to be believed. I walked in there about 3 weeks ago. It's a little more now. It's probably about 5 weeks ago. And there had been violence and a stabbing the night before. And as I got into the elevator, somebody pointed. There was a security guard there who pointed at the marks from the night before that, let's just say, that were still apparent on the walls. That's not good enough. There's children in those buildings. There's seniors in those buildings. There's young families. There's people that deserve to have a dignified quality of life. We need to be investing again in social infrastructure. Things like community centers. I mean, these are things, again, we've put $20 billion into our social infrastructure platform, and we're going to be working with communities like the Hispanic and Latino community to see what kind of projects we can bring forth. Child poverty. Our Child Canada benefit is going to bring, on average, for a typical family of 4, about $2,500 extra in tax-free help each year. That is going to bring 315,000 children out of poverty. We consider that to be frontline necessary work. These children deserve better. They deserve food on the table, and that's our commitment. Our final commitment on the economic front is to lower taxes for the middle class. How are we doing that, people might ask? Well, we're doing that by increasing the tax on the wealthiest 1% of Canadians a little bit, so that we have money to be able to lower taxes on the middle class. We're understanding, as I know my colleague from the NDP is, we're understanding the pressures that families are facing, and we understand the blind eye that the Conservatives have turned over the last decade. They've had the lowest rate of growth over the last decade that has been around for the last 80 years. This is the time that a government and that a party can show leadership And that's our plan. We're going to run modest deficits for the next 3 years, and we're going to do it because the debt to GDP ratio is so low and interest rates are low. These are modest deficits. They're deficits that are necessary. Leadership federally looks like this. You need to invest in Canadians. You need to invest in the community. You need to invest in jobs. Finally, on immigration, because I said at the beginning, I am an immigrant too, and I have 30 seconds. I'm an immigrant with 30 seconds. I have been horrified by Bill C-24, okay? This is a bill that does create two classes of citizenship, two classes of Canadian citizens. A Liberal government will repeal Bill C-24. This is not the Canada that we know, it's not the Canada that we love, and we need to make sure that we are not putting out there, it's totally un-Canadian, we need to repeal that law. So C-24 will be gone, that is a commitment. We need to be defending the rights of immigrants, we need to be defending the rights of all Canadians, and this Harper government has certainly not been doing that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We've addressed pretty much the two questions that we had for you, and I wonder if there are members of the public, of the audience, who have questions for you. I see that we have Kiki, Maria, you have a question back there, and then we have Isabel Inclán. Are you guys up to it?
Yeah.
Fantastic. And I'll interpret it for you.
Oh, thanks.
Necesita micro.
Con todo el respeto que me merecen, gracias por estar aquí informando.
So with all due respect, and thank you for coming here and informing us about these things.
Pero tenemos una expresión en español.
We have a Spanish expression, a Spanish
En
saying.
Latinoamérica.
In Latin America, yes.
Los políticos para nosotros son como los hombres cuando están en celo.
Politicians to us are like men when they are in heat.
Muchas promesas.
A lot of promises.
Sí.
A lot of promises for their purpose.
Ya, tengo varias preguntas.
So I have a number of questions. Chiqui, le vamos a pedir que nada más sea una para poder dar la oportunidad a otras personas también.
La primera es,
So my first question is,
¿han considerado los políticos aquí en Canadá que la pobreza que se está dando en el país está relacionada con la venta de productos chinos que vienen a matar las economías?
so I wonder to what extent the political parties that you represent have thought about how poverty in Canada is related to all the imports from China that have effectively killed manufacturing jobs here in Canada. Mike, do you want to take a stab at that? A minute? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yes, under the last 10 years, I mean, I look in my own writing of York Centre, which had a number of smaller manufacturing firms. We didn't have, well, we've got some bigger ones too, but certainly a number of smaller manufacturing and small businesses. And they have been absolutely eroded, and they've gone out of business over this last decade because the conditions that this Harper government have created. We need to be investing in the economy, and we very much believe that our plan to invest in infrastructure, in social infrastructure, in environment and green infrastructure is going to create jobs, is going to bring manufacturing and jobs back into particularly, my riding, but of course across the GTA and across Canada. We need to have leadership once again that understands the importance of getting this economy moving. And
that means that we would require to have a special type of relationship, business relationship, commercial relationship with China?
I'm not understanding the question entirely. I'm saying that one of the, yeah. I'm not speaking directly to the Chinese relationship because I don't think I'm necessarily able to give details there in terms of it's not in our platform, but we need to be once again growing and investing in the economy and creating the jobs and making sure we've got commitments to small and medium-sized enterprises in Canada. We're going to be, that are going to help foster that relationship. Again,
Sorry,
yeah, there you go.
Gracias por la pregunta. La razón por la cual yo decidí, the reason I decided to run for the NDP is because of that. I am so tired of people promising me they're going to do things and then governing a different way. And I think the Harper government has literally decimated our country, but
That's right.
My biggest issue with the Liberals is that they run their campaigns on the left and then they govern on the right. So Bill C-51 is a small example, but one of the most important examples of saying we believe in immigrants, we want to protect immigrants, but we voted for Bill C-51. And I think the heart of your question is when we make our trade decisions and when we decide how to operate as an economy, what are the priorities we have between economic growth and human rights and quality of products and all of those things? And I think one of the things the NDP has done very well is talked about the importance of trade having two aspects. So the first is that we actually need to consult with people before we enter into trade agreements. So saying we did a poll and 80% of Canadians is not consultation. Because as we all know, polls are often engineered in certain ways to get the outcomes that we want. So thinking really about how do we consult as governments before we enter into these agreements. The NDP and Tom Mulcair has said we are open to trade. NAFTA is important. We've already entered into NAFTA. But let's make sure that all of our trade agreements are ones where we've consulted. So the current entry into TPP may or may not be the right decision for Canada, but we can't know that without finding out from industry and from Canadians what you want as voters. And we've continued to fail to do that in both the Conservative and the Liberal government, and I think that's a risk. The second part of the answer to your question, I think, is how do we think about the way in which we work such that we're promising things that we can actually deliver on? So this is a challenge because I think voters often want to hear something that's impossible for you to vote for them. So they want me to say, we're going to have every service available to you and no new taxes. And both Mike and I have talked about the fact that there are going to be adjustments. You know, the NDP is talking about a balanced budget, and that, in my mind, is very, very important. But at the same time, what is really important is saying we're going to deliver on daycare, healthcare, and employment, and actually trying to do that. And so that's our commitment.
Thank you very much. So perhaps we could turn it over to Isabel. You had a question as well?
Oh, yeah. It's regarding the visa for Mexican. My media is Mexican. I would like to know the position of the parties and your opinion regarding the position of visa for Mexican.
Okay, I'm just gonna,
He's going to repeat the
Mike,
question.
I'm just going to repeat the question for those who didn't hear it. Isabel Inclán is a correspondent for Notimex, a news agency from Mexico, perhaps one of the largest ones in the Spanish-speaking world, and she wants to know what your respective party positions are in regards to the visa requirements for Mexican citizens.
It's an easy one for me to answer, actually. We just had an announcement last week which had a number of immigration issues addressed, including family reunification, which we're going to be increasing, and in particular, the elimination of the Mexican visa requirements. The elimination of the Mexican visa requirements. So that's what we're going to be doing, eliminating the Mexican visas.
The NDP and Tom Mulcair have a similar position, that the visas will be eliminated. To add to that, I'll add three things. So around visas, we have to look at temporary foreign workers permits and what that is causing in terms of people's ability to, one, meet their basic needs, and also how that limits the pathway to citizenship. So it's not just visas of people visiting and coming here, but understanding when people are coming here to work, what kind of rights do we afford them, and how do we open up a pathway to citizenship? I've spoken about this already, but I think it also speaks to visas and Mexican workers here, which is the foreign credential crisis. So those cuts happen by both the Liberal and the Conservative government, and we have people who do come, even when they get their visas and they can't work in the fields they're qualified for. So an investment of $30 million into trying to help diminish sort of the wait time. You know, my mom says it took her 5 to 10 years to adjust as an immigrant and actually integrate economically. People are now telling me it's taking 10 plus years. It's getting worse, not better. So I think that that's something we need to care about. When we just talk about visas, yes or no, it's very easy to make promises in an election. And then the last thing I'd say is a huge commitment by Mulcair and the NDP to stop the backlog. So even if you get rid of visas for people who want to come and then eventually become citizens, there's a huge backlog. Thank you.
We have time for just a couple more questions. I know we had a hand over here, Elena, we had a hand over here. Perhaps we'll turn it to you first. I think you had your... Do you need the microphone or...?
To me?
Yes, please. Okay, perfect. That works. My name is Ida Caballero.
Soy una parte de la organización de Astor.
I am a member of ASHTOR, the seniors organization, Latin American Seniors Organization of Toronto.
A través de nuestra línea de teléfono he escuchado muchísimas preguntas, pedidos de nuestros seniors y no tendríamos el día suficiente hora para enumerarlas todas, pero he querido preguntarle a estos dos candidatos qué planes tienen para affordable housing for seniors, que es la pregunta número 1 de nuestros seniors.
We get so many questions from seniors that we'd be here all day if we took up all of the issues that we are approached with. But the number one issue that we are approached about is affordable housing for seniors. I wonder if you could take a couple of minutes each to talk about this. We can start with Tanya this time.
Mm-hmm. So this is an issue near and dear to my heart for 2 reasons. My parents are seniors, and I've seen how much people are struggling in their community around making ends meet and looking at their pensions and seeing if they will be able to make it by. But also because in my riding in Etobicoke Centre, we have the highest number of seniors per capita of any riding in Ontario. So I am hearing these concerns at the door. Speaking to affordable housing specifically, we have to recognize we have 200,000 people that are senior citizens in this country living in poverty. So the people that have built this country are now living in poverty, and 2/3 of seniors are retiring without secure incomes. So worried about their pensions, worried about their bills, having high bills around prescription drugs. The affordable housing question is even broader. I think it acutely affects seniors and vulnerable populations, such as single mothers, our Aboriginal community that has a greater reliance at times on affordable housing. We haven't seen the long-term investment that we need into affordable housing, and what we're seeing is not only a decline in the number of units of affordable housing, but in our maintenance of affordable housing. And so the Mulcair government has said that is a critical area where we'll focus resources. But just to go one step beyond that, I think we also need to think of healthcare and the protection of pensions around seniors, so that those that have a little bit to get by are still protected as well. It's an important group.
The issue of affordable housing for seniors and in general is something that absolutely comes up in my writing very, very often. We've got a lot of people living in some really bad conditions. And I have to tell you, one of the things I've been able to do in York Centre that the Conservative Member of Parliament hasn't done in the last 5 years is engage the community on issues. And I'm very proud that I actually did a town hall on affordable housing back about 3 months ago with Adam Vaughan, who's clearly been very vocal on this subject, and also with Art Eggleton, the former MP from York Centre, who is now heading up John Tory's review and report on Toronto community housing. So this is something that's a real priority. we're investing, as I mentioned previously, $20 billion into social infrastructure. And part of that is significantly going to be on affordable housing. We've pledged to commit 25,000 new units a year for the next number of years for affordable housing, because this issue has not at all been addressed by the Harper government over the last decade. In terms of seniors, we're going to help lift hundreds of thousands of seniors out of poverty by increasing the guaranteed income supplement for low-income seniors by 10%. This will give 1 million of our most vulnerable seniors, who are often women, almost $1,000 more each year. Again, I've mentioned that we're going to be refurbishing existing affordable housing units and building more units. We need to make sure that seniors can afford to stay in their homes, and for those that want to come out, if they can't afford to stay in their houses, if they need a smaller space, that we're once again creating the affordable housing, because it's just York Centre, when 20, 30 years ago, these units were being built. They're not being built anymore. There is no plan. The Harper government does not have a plan as it exists to affordable housing. It's something that really is a priority. And again, I hear it at the doors all the time. People want the help, they need the help, and a Liberal government will take leadership on this file and ensure that the funds are there. We'll work with the municipalities, with the provinces, things like co-op housing. I was in a co-op housing unit actually yesterday, banging on doors. We need to be doing more of that. We need to be making sure that people have a roof over their head, and it's the type of place that any one of us would be comfortable living.
Elena, you had a question as well?
I do. And I'm not saying in English because my Spanish is not as good as yours. I work for Credit Canada, and I work for a not-for-profit credit counseling agency. And one of the problems that we're seeing a lot is the fact that the debt load has increased tremendously, especially in the last 5 years, because the interest rate is so low. So, and not that I support any party at this time, so I'm not here on behalf of the Conservative government or anything like that, but they have endeavored on financial literacy education. Not as much as I would like, but they have stepped up to it. How is your party considering sustaining that financial literacy education throughout Canada, and especially right now? I mean, there's a lot of youth or young adults who are entering the workforce with a huge debt load because of student loans. But not only that, my biggest concern would be for seniors also. They're about to start retirement with a huge debt load. So most of them are considering bankruptcy before they've even started their lives, and the ones who are retiring are considering bankruptcy because they have no other options. So what are you guys going to do with regards to this?
Yeah, so listen, before education on being able to handle one's debt is very important, and your organization obviously does very good work. Having said that, while I appreciate your comments that the Conservatives have provided funding for that, what they've also done... Education support. Sorry. While they've provided the support, they've also created the conditions where it's entirely necessary. So it's great that they're providing support, but this is a government that is watched as the economy has slowed down, has watched as people's debt load have risen. We look at students as an example. You mentioned students.
But what I'm saying to you now is that what is your party going to do if your party takes possession coming October 20th?
Given around the television.
Forget what they've done. What are you going to do?
Okay.
Well, we've talked already about how we're going to create more jobs, how we're going to invest. I can't answer your question directly on our policy towards financial literacy. I might as well just say that and make that clear. Standing here, I'm happy to get back to you with the answer on that, and I'll find out the details and what we have in our platform that relates to it. But I will say this. It's about creating jobs and making sure, of course, we have to continue to support the financial literacy and making sure that that young people and seniors understand the impact of being in debt and what the options are, but it's also about doing away with the conditions that are creating the problem. And one example is that we just announced a couple of days ago that student loans, a Liberal government will ensure that those loans are not due until students are earning a minimum of $25,000 a year as a salary. So we're going to try to help students that are in debt make sure that those loans are not payable until they have a steady income coming in. I think, again, we need to be creating jobs, we need to show leadership, and I think that exists across whether it's seniors, youth, and of course, most importantly, middle-class Canadians in general.
So I have to agree with Mike on this one in that I also can't tell you in terms of what our commitment is to financial literacy. I would not say that I feel that the Conservative government has been supportive around creating conditions where people understand their financial literacy. Most people who are struggling in those terms, the 13,000 students I work with every day, are struggling so much getting jobs that they're not trying to get training on financial literacy. So where I agree with Mike is the root of the problem isn't just the training, which I think is important. I'm an economist, and I work a lot in communities and helping, especially communities of color and immigrant communities, understand more about savings. So how can you put some money away, even a little bit, in your RSPs and education funds? I think that is extremely important. And again, like him, I can't speak to what our formal policy is, but I do agree with him that the problem isn't actually just the literacy. There's a deeper problem, which he's talking about, which is the crisis of the economy and the debt load we have to begin with. To teach people about debt, but to have not created solutions for how we resolve those issues that people are bearing, I think is just as problematic. To say, well, we're in a bad situation, let me teach you how to fix it, how to deal with it, is not as important as saying, how can we fix this? How can we create jobs that are sustainable and have dignity for people? Where people can feed their families and not have to work 2 part-time jobs and worry all the time? How can we have people saving and pay for education? How can we have education rates and debt rates when students graduate that they can manage so that they're not in poverty after a master's degree?
Right.
Where we disagree, and I have to say this, and this is what I struggle with, is when I hear the Liberal platform, the promises I hear sound very much like 1993, the Red Book of 93. It's all, like when I hear it, I think, oh my God, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is what we need. Investment in seniors, investment in affordable housing, investment in healthcare, investment in, helping students with student loans. In 1993, the Liberals won with a clear majority. And they made these exact same promises, and they had the biggest cuts to education, healthcare, job creation that we have seen, bigger than the Conservatives. And the reason I need to say that is because it's one thing to promise all of this delivery, but we need to start actually putting these plans in action. And it's something that I struggle with, because when I hear it, I am moved, but I've actually seen the opposite happen. And so what we actually need is to invest, not to say we're going to do it at election time and then cut and see the austerity cuts we saw with Paul Martin that literally decimated our country and has been made worse by the Conservative government. What we need to see is an actual investment so that we're not carrying the debt burden that you're talking about. And then financial literacy is always important. I don't know, for me, that's the major platform of the federal government. But I think it is important.
It's important.
Yeah.
I think it's fine.
We have time for one last question, and then we're going to turn it over to Nestor Castro, who is the director and producer of Hispanic Roots.
So, I would like to know why the Liberals, they are now eliminating the C-51. Because this, I applaud really the NDP because they are very right to do that. We feel that we are like citizens, second-class citizens, because in any time, for example, I work in the media. If something is wrong in my communication, in my output, they can consider like it's an act of terrorism, and they can take it out me, my family, or somebody take it out to our own country. Maybe the Liberals, they are thinking to continue a war with these countries in the Middle East, and that's why they have to keep this law in place in order to be safe for them. Like I was with the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party for many years, they were attacking all these countries, and also the NDP, they say they don't want it to be involved in these wars. However, the liberals, they start keeping the C-51 in place, but it's very wrong.
So the question has to do with Bill C-51, and the question is, why did the Liberal Party support that bill?
Keeping the C-51.
Right.
We believed that in the days after the two Ottawa attacks, there was an important need in terms of security and also in terms of individual rights and freedoms. From our point of view, the Conservatives, we brought to committee amendments that we're going to address, because there was security concerns, and there were concerns that are addressed by C-51, and we support many of those. However, there was two important amendments that we brought to committee and that we have pledged to bring into place as soon as we are in power, and they relate to oversight and a sunset clause, because we believe that while security is important, and listen, after 9/11, it was a Liberal government that kept this country safe with the Anti-Terrorism Act. We believe that the Conservative government has not done enough to protect individual rights and freedoms, and in particular, we are going to bring in parliamentary oversight for Bill C-51 and also a sunset clause, so that after 4 years, the bill will automatically terminate if it's not renewed by Parliament. We believe it's important. We believe that there's security issues that need to be addressed, but we also need to be balancing that, as many of our other allies do, with the individual rights. That's what we'll do. We're going to bring in those. We have stipulated this all the way through, and that's our position on Bill C-51.
Tanya, do you want to take 30 seconds perhaps?
Oh, he had more time.
He certainly did. Okay, well,
I
amend
think
it.
for me, Bill C-51 you can't do in 30 seconds. It is literally one of the things that is most important in our political system right now. Tengo dos palabras, conveniencia política. The Liberal Party voted for Bill C-51 because 80% of Canadians at the time were for Bill C-51. This constant coupling of the removal and abuse of civil rights in the name of security is something we need to be very concerned about. As a human rights lawyer, we need to be terrified about this, particularly because certain groups are disproportionately affected. People of color, new immigrants, and in certain situations, there is an Islamophobia that has been created in our country that we need to be conscious of as citizens. The Liberal government voted for it because it was popular and because they wanted to win the popular vote, which is my issue with the Liberals. Saying we want to protect immigrants, but if we think we're going to get votes for this, we're going to vote with the Conservatives. There have been over 70 important votes where the Liberals have voted with the Conservatives. This is the most critical one. The NDP did the opposite. Tom Mulcair knew that he was going to lose popularity by voting against it, but he said it is unconscionable and we will not stand for this kind of bill. We will repeal Bill C-51 if we are in power. And so I think it's a play on two things. On the security versus liberties argument, but also what do we do when we think things are popular? What do we vote when we are in government, when we think we're going to get more votes, versus what we tell people we're going to do and who we're working for? And I think that's at the heart of this.
We're trying to wrap up. We have, I was going to ask you, in fact, in terms of the arrangements we have with this venue, do we have time left for a couple of questions? There are two people who have been insisting. Oh, you've got to go?
Yeah, we've got another thing at 9.
Okay, so I guess that's the answer to the question. The candidates have to leave?
Well, he will be staying for 2 minutes. He will. So, beginning to have the question.
He's going to do something to help you, I think.
He's not in a hurry.
Oh.
10 o'clock in the morning, and then we will do much.
Yep.
My name is Julio Fini. I am, just to clarify, I am a member of the NDP. I was a candidate last election in your West. You are particularly your center, so I know your writing quite well, although they changed the boundary. My question is two parts. The first, personal, for each of you. The second question is about the party. The first question is for you, what you are going to do personally if you are elected. Because most of the people that are elected, the member of parliament, as you said before, they are elected and they don't appear in the community. If the Latin American community appear in your office, what you are going to do? Number one. Number two, what are you going to do yourself inside of the party to fight so the party change the positions and start making a coalition of progressive people to be able to kick off Harper. Because right now Harper could win, still a minority, but with more member of parliament, and could be 35% of the vote. And we call this democracy. So I want to have your personal answer to this, and you will be accountable.
A ver, las promesas. So for me, I think one of the most important roles I have to play, and we all should play, is we have to represent our local community. You're talking about the Latin American community, which I feel already very connected to. I already work with Latin American people that are here, that are looking for secure jobs, that need help with visas, that need help with their CVs to get jobs. So I think I will continue that commitment. In my community, I need to represent seniors that are struggling in my community with healthcare needs, home care needs. My parents are seniors. So part of my promises have to be very, very specific to that community, and what I'm doing already for the Latin American community will continue, that solidarity. What I think you're asking in the second question that I think is so important is how can I help to change my party, and what would I see in terms of coalition? And I think the best way that I can answer that is we need people in government that actually have an understanding of the things that they're talking about, voting on, and debating. So I will say this about Mike, from the little I know, he is somebody that is in the community and cares about the community. And I think that you need that. I think you also need people that have had things like international experience working in business, experience working in different communities for all people in government. And I think I bring that. So I think having an economics background, but having worked with people that are struggling the most in our community, refugees and displaced people in 3 continents for the UN, gives me a sense of some of the different issues, los temas que tenemos. And so I think I will bring that. How far I can push my party to a coalition, I don't know what promise I can make you about that. I think a coalition makes sense not just to beat Harper, but you actually have to be aligned with your visions. And so I think we have to think about a Canadian community. What I'm hearing a lot is we are so afraid, and we have been made so afraid by this government, and with our strategic voting and the lack of proportional representation, we currently have a majority Conservative government that the majority of Canadians didn't vote for, right? So what I'll push for is proportional representation, because what that means to me is your vote counts, and who you vote for is represented. I don't know if a coalition makes sense. We are saying we want a coalition to take out Harper, but we also need a coalition that's real, where we have the same priorities, right? I want to vote for the Canada that I want. I don't want to vote just to keep out a Canada that I don't want. I want to vote for something.
Thank you for the question. So your first point was about what am I going to do when somebody from the Latin and Hispanic community shows up in my office? Well, I'm not going to wait for them to show up in my office. Even as a candidate, I've been engaging the community in York Centre over the last number of months. I'm very proud that I just did a town hall meeting with members of your community and members of the Latin and Hispanic media about 3 weeks ago. It's ongoing work. We've got a member of parliament in my riding right now that hasn't shown up in the riding. There's been no democracy between elections over the last 5 years. Only at election time, when there's a need for a sign on a lawn and a vote at the door, that's when he shows up. So from my point of view, it's not waiting for the community to show up at my door, it's me showing up at their doors, me inviting them to attend events of interest to them. As I mentioned, I just did an event on affordable housing in the community. I did another one on seniors and healthcare with Carolyn Bennett and representatives from the community on aging and healthy lifestyles for seniors. That's the work that's going to continue. In particular, one last thing on the local, and then we'll discuss the national. I've made a pledge, and this was backed up by both the local city councillor and the member of provincial parliament, and that is that within 90 days of being brought into office, I'm going to have the first cross-level of government town hall with all 3 of the federal, provincial, and municipal in the room. It's going to be happening every 90 days in York Centre. And it's going to allow the community to interact with us. We're going to leave our egos at the door. We're going to be there to engage and listen to the community about the issues that are of concern to them without them having to be bounced around from one level of government to the other.
In terms of moving forward, what am I going to do within my caucus? First of all, I'm going to wait until October 20th, until Canadians have spoken, until Canadians have voted, and then we'll see what the political landscape looks like. But I can tell you, I've been a strong advocate for my community, for all the communities of York Centre. It's one of the most marvelously diverse ridings in Canada. We have so many vibrant, wonderful, the Filipino community, the Italian community, the Jewish community, the Hispanic and Latino community, the Kurdish, and on and on and on.
Our job is to listen to the voices of our community and make sure those voices are heard, not just in our party's caucus, but in the Parliament of Canada. That's the commitment I'm making to the people of York Centre. That's the work I'm going to do, both as a candidate and afterwards as an MP after October 19th. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to turn it over to Lubelis Ramos. I think we're running out of time, and I don't know if he has a question or if he has closing words. So, but thank you.
I'd like to finish with the thoughts. Thank you very much for the wonderful display of understanding and response to the questions. Very thoughtful, quite frankly. I think it's great to see a debate like this one in which we are able to focus on issues, on platforms, without so much of the traditional politicking. I think the last question was particularly poignant because in some sense, I must say, our communities always struggle with that sense of cynicism about politicians do one thing during the on and off period and the actual election time. So I'm very clear something very significant. So I would like to thank you on behalf of the Hispanic Development Council and the coalition called Tu Voto Cuenta, Tu Voto Decide. Your vote counts, your vote decides. It's a new endeavor in the community. So, and I think also would like to wish you best in the upcoming election. The platforms certainly are there for people to see, and actually we'll see them not only from a Canadian perspective, because I know people are looking at our elections in other countries as well, which is something very significant. And I would like to also thank Juan Carranza for his always masterful way of conducting our conversation. And I noticed at very several points of your interventions, people was thinking that we should applaud, but we didn't. So at this point, en este punto quisiera pedir un aplauso fuerte para nuestros invitados y de